Hello, everyone. My name's Matt. I look after EMEA partnerships here at MetaMetrics, based in the UK, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar. Thank you all for taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us for what we hope will be an informative, engaging, and positive discussion. I have some brilliant colleagues with me today, including our Chief Customer Officer for International Markets, Matt Boyce, who will be helping with some of our Q&A. Hi, Matt.
Hello, everybody. Great to meet you all.
But I'll first hand to Neena and Deborah to introduce themselves. Neena, can we start with you, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Neena Saha. I'm a literacy consultant. I'm also the author of the Reading Research Recap blog, where I talk about new research that comes out in reading and literacy and the practical or take-home messages for teachers and practitioners. In a former life, I was also a teacher, so I taught kids how to read, and I did some doctoral research in how students learn how to read. I'm happy to be part of this webinar talking about such an important topic.
Thank you, Neena. And Deborah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Maclaren. I am dialing in from London this morning. I'm the Chief Exec of LoveReading and LoveReading for Kids. I am a book reviewer, a passionate literacy advocate, and a regular speaker on the importance of reading for pleasure and the transformative power of books. Our mission is to share book love and get more people reading on a daily basis. It's a daily reality. So any chance I get to shine a light on that, I'm there. So thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you all. So we have some wonderful guests as part of our panel today, and they will help us explore the threat of a UK reading recession, a silent but accelerating decline in deep, sustained reading among children and young adults, as well as what we can do to counteract the impacts and potentially build skills for the future. This session brings together research, expert insights, and practical ideas for tackling the challenges, but also the opportunities of engaging readers in a digital age. And we'll try to highlight positive interventions from evidence-based reading strategies. We're also proud to align today's discussion with the upcoming 2026 National Year of Reading, making this an important moment to reflect on how we can all play a role in strengthening a culture of reading. So with that, let's dive in. I have some questions to ask of both Deborah and Neena that I hope will spark some discussion. So from your perspective at LoveReading, what are you seeing anecdotally when it comes to young people's relationship with reading? We hear some stats like lowest levels of reading for pleasure since 2005, 1 in 4 11-year-olds not reaching the expected standard, translating to more than 8 million adults struggling to read. Are these numbers reflected in what you're seeing?
Yeah, Matt, absolutely. It's not a pretty picture, unfortunately. The National Literacy Trust produced their literacy survey in June, and it just further highlighted we are, in fact, in a reading for pleasure crisis. You know, daily reading among children and young people have continued to decline, and they're at the lowest levels since tracking began. And it's terrifying data. So 1 in 3 kids aged 8 to 18, 1 in 3 say they enjoy reading a lot or quite a lot. And that has dropped by 36% since 2005. Enjoyment has fallen across all age groups, with a particularly sharp decline, which is the worrying bit, amongst primary age children and the teenage boys. Now, there's no surprise there. That's been an issue for a while. But also daily reading, and this is about children choosing to read. That sort of, you know, not being forced to read, but choosing to read. And here it is, just 18% of children read something every day in their free time, and that's down from 51% in 2005. So the data is really showing, and this is highlighted by everything we are seeing at LoveReading for Kids, is that there is a serious erosion of reading culture among our young people. And this will have lasting effects on literacy, on well-being, on educational equity. You know, we've got 1 in 4 kids leaving primary school here in the UK unable to read at the required level. And of course, that gap then widens, and those children are getting left behind. So it's really, it's not a good place for us to be.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with everything Deborah said. I've seen the stats as well. They're really concerning. And then anecdotally, as a parent, and when you talk to their teachers, I mean, they're seeing it as well. And it's really troubling, like you said, for all those reasons that we know reading for pleasure is a good thing. It helps with so many things socially, academically, life outcomes in terms of jobs and just general well-being, even health outcomes. There's some data on it now. So it's so important to, address these stats and come up with some solutions.
Absolutely. And it's just worth mentioning as well, because if children aren't choosing to read, and we know everything changes when they read, we know children who read for pleasure are more successful later in life. But of course, if they're not reading, they then become adults who don't read. And the latest reading agency stats showed that half of all adults in the UK don't read regularly for pleasure. That's 1 in 6. And that's 1 in 6 that struggle to read at all. So, this is really key, because, this has wide-reaching impact on our whole economy. So it's the kids become adults who don't read, and that's a really worrying sign.
The economy is an interesting one, isn't it? I think I read the number 40 billion in terms of economic impact in the UK. So I'll try not to make the next question too leading in terms of the answer. But the second question I have for you, again, start with Deborah, if that's okay. Yeah. Is back to the subject of the webinar. We mentioned swipe and scrolling and struggling, right? How do you think our digital first world and what you might call dopamine driven environments, in terms of exploring the causes, how are these impacting children's ability to engage with this sustained reading? Speaking also as a parent of a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old myself, right? I can see it every day. What's your perspective? To start with, Deborah, please.
Oh, it's a nightmare. I don't think anyone could say any different if they have children. I've got a 17-year-old and I've got a 13-year-old, and it's really tough. I mean, I joke with them that when I was growing up, I had 1 TV in the house and 4 channels. And you think about what they have got at their disposal, at their fingertips now, with mobile phones, with the amount of streaming and social media. So we're miles away from the digital landscape that we grew up in. It's just worlds apart. And of course, kids today are growing up in environments that have been carefully crafted, carefully engineered to grab their attention and keep it there and deliver instant gratification, instant rewards. And everything from social media to short form video, gamification of apps, it's all creating this, as you say, this dopamine driven scenario, this cycle that encourages them to doom scroll. I mean, it pulls me in. I've lost far too many hours on TikTok and on Instagram. So it's hard for a book to compete with that. Now, we can't blame it for everything. It's not the entire reason for the drop in reading for pleasure, but it's definitely a significant factor. And we believe at Love Reading for Kids that books are, and reading for pleasure offers an absolutely vital counterbalance, if you like. They can do so much that screens can't. Everything that Neena just said, it's about imagination, it's about empathy, it's critical thinking, it's all of those things that quick fire scroll can't deliver. But
Yeah.
we have to meet kids where they are as well, don't we? And, and utilize some of what we've learned, in that digital landscape.
I agree with everything Deborah just said. There's a lot of research. We know screens are a problem. They're a huge distraction. That just the presence of a phone by you, there's studies showing it's a distraction.
Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, as adults, we have a hard time not doing it. Imagine a kid, right, who's not equipped with these tools to, how do they engage with a screen? And there is research showing there's a definite paper advantage for reading comprehension still. It's not a massive effect size, but they're clearly across a pattern of studies it shows, and we don't know quite why, but there's this hypothesis that it could be that, when you're scrolling, it's a quick fix, it's short bits of information, you're not doing sustained reading comprehension when you're on a screen. So, I mean, it makes sense for all the reasons that we intuitively kind of feel like it's a problem. There's some research to back that up. And you were saying, Deborah, about like the way that a book can transport you, right? It's so powerful. People who read for pleasure know that. It's such a great escape that technology just can't mimic. And there's actually a term in research to support that too. It's called the fiction effect, where these students who read for pleasure and read fiction they can be really engrossed in it and transports you to these other worlds, they have higher reading comprehension scores. So there's kind of this well-known effect or phenomenon that goes to support that.
I think that's really critical. I mean, I think part of it, and I've definitely done this with my children where, a book I've loved, I'm trying to press it into their hands. I'm like, Mum, that's just not, no, that's, it's not for me. So I think it's about getting the right book for the right child at the right age range, at the right reading level. Because, if we're able to do that, then that will compete. We're making them read a book that doesn't speak to them, that doesn't engage them, it's going to be a harder battle to get them off that screen. But if we can try and find that right book that really speaks to their interests and speaks to them, then we've got a fighting chance.
Yeah.
And that right book might outshine the lure of the scroll, right?
Yeah, that's what I love what LoveReading is doing too, because I have a funny story with my son. That was dead on. That was like, he fought. There was one book I knew he would like from reading reviews, the Dog Man series, and he fought on it all the time. Finally, got him to sit down and start reading it, and he loved it. He would start, when we go to a bookstore, start reading it before we even got to the checkout line, and it engrossed him. And from there, it took off. But you're so right about just getting that one book that kid is interested in and at their level to get them started.
I think that's really key. And it's really interesting that you brought up that book, because I remember my son coming back from primary school, and he must have been in year 5 or 6, and he was obsessed with the Wimpy Kid series. And I know I know a lot of people are quite snobby about, some of these series of books that, that maybe aren't as challenging as we'd like. And I went mad with the school, actually, because they basically said to him, you can't read that, Jack, put it down, that's too easy for you. And I went in to speak to them, because I was like, look, what you need to understand is this is his comfort read. It's not the only book he's reading, but he loves it. And these are the books that made him fall in love with reading. And they're sort of like the gateway that are going to take him to the next level of books. But without that gateway book, he's never going to fall in love, because we don't like doing stuff we're rubbish at, right? And we don't like reading books that are too difficult for us. I've got to be in the mood to read a big literary tome, and kids are the same. So I think, that it's about that book that will help them find the next book and the next one.
Yeah, exactly.
I think some of your answers, well, I think firstly, it's the look you get from your 8-year-old when you say there was only 4 channels on your TV. That's the first thing that normally gets them going. But I think some of your answers quite nicely touch on a bit of balance, right? Because I think we need to acknowledge that there are these challenges. But it's, you know, balance is important and different perspectives is important, right? So it quite nicely moves us into the next question that I have, which is, you know, some might argue, you talk about paper versus digital. Some might argue that children are actually reading more than ever, just in different formats. So Deborah, I'm curious as to how you would respond to that, and, you know, how does engagement and comprehension, you know, does that weaken across broader learning, or what would be your view on that? And Neena, interested in your views too.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's true. In one sense, children are surrounded by more words than ever before. If you think, you know, they're scrolling, there's captions, there's messages, there's online, you know, articles. On the surface, that looks like more reading, in a sense, but you know, going back to what Neena was saying before about comprehension, it's just not the same. You know, this is bite-sized, fragmented, fleeting information, skimming, scrolling for information, and, you know, the swipe, the minute that's not what they want, it's gone, rather than that immersion into another world, into a story, or if fiction isn't for them, into a factual, you know, a factual, brilliant non-fiction information book. And that sort of engagement demands focus and comprehension in a totally different way. So I do think it will have a knock-on effect across not just literacy, but the whole curriculum. Because if they're not reading or comprehending at primary age level, from a reading perspective, how can that unlock the rest of the curriculum when they get to secondary? So I think, you know, that's probably the first thing I'd say, you know, on that point.
Yeah, exactly. What Deborah and I were talking about, when you're on a screen, you are not engaging there's a great quote from some of the articles and papers I was reading. It's not continuous, sustained, or concentrated. And those are the things that lead to deep processing and reading comprehension skill growth. And you're just not getting that from screens. So yeah, they might be seeing more text, but are they engaging with it and comprehending in a deep, meaningful way? I would say no. And I think most people would agree with that as well.
Yeah. There's another thing. I don't know whether you've seen this campaign that actually, I think it's Jack Black is fronting, is the turn on the subtitles. Have you seen this?
Oh, I think I've heard a little about this. Yeah.
I mean, it sort of goes a little bit against what I've just said, but I think it's interesting because one of the whole ideas around turn on the subtitles as a campaign is about saying to parents, look, actually, if we turn on the subtitles, you know, the amount of time that kids are on TV, spending more time on screens, on watching TV, as parents are busier, have got less time to read to them. And what they're suggesting is by turning on the subtitles, this, or, you know, and asking broadcasters to add literacy grade captions to their shows, that actually this could be a great way of almost supporting children's reading. And so it was just another thing that I'd looked into recently. I thought that's quite interesting. You know, it'd be good to see what traction that is getting, and, you know, whether, you know, top scientists apparently have proven that turning on the subtitles can double the chances of a child becoming good at reading. So I'd like to delve into that a bit more and you know, understand what that looks like.
Yeah, and I don't think it goes against what you were saying earlier, because when
No.
it's about learning for read, they need those skills first.
Yeah.
Seeing a print and hearing it's going to help them learn those foundational skills. So I think that's a great idea. It would be interesting to see follow-up study. I hadn't heard about that it doubles. But that's if they're going to be on a screen and they may not have those foundational skills, and seeing that's definitely going to help. So
yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's
definitely
really
got an action to take away, haven't we, for us? That sounds like an interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Staying in the realm of the positive, but for the next question. So Deborah, given your background in media and publishing, What specific strategies have you found most effective at LoveReading for re-engaging reluctant young readers?
Oh gosh, how long have you got? Right, we just this one question, we could talk about this all day. One of the things we do actually is of course, we mentioned before that you can filter by age range, you can filter by genre on the LoveReading for Kids platform. And we also have a function where you can read opening extracts of books to try before you buy, or just to see whether it's the right amount of words on page, or so again, going back to that, the right book for the right child. So I think that's one of the first things. But the second thing is, I don't know what it's like in the US, but over here, we are so focused on World Book Day. It's like one day a year, we're going to solve this reading crisis. And that's why this 2026 year of reading is so good. Historically, it's been World Book Day, which is wonderful. It's a, huge celebration. Everyone dresses up, and one day a year we get excited. But for us, we say that every day needs to be World Book Day. And, encouraging that love of reading is critical, and shining a light on books all year round so that that's normal at home and at school is really, really important. Then reading role models, and I think this is critical. Like, as a parent, you've seen the books behind me. I am a reading role model. In fact, I probably actually turn my kids off books because I'm so much of a reading role model. However, parents modeling reading, kids seeing you read and place value in books, I think is really important. And if you're working in a school, teachers sharing enthusiasm for reading has got so much research to show that enhances kids' engagement with books. And create young reading role models. In a primary that I was a school governor of for about 8 years, actually, we created a core group of reading champions. And they were like little junior librarians from year 5, year 6, so sort of 9, 10, 11. And they worked together to help reading come alive in the school. They wrote book reviews, they tidied up the library, we taught them how to use the scanner in the library, and they were sharing the books they've loved. There's nothing better than and more powerful than someone pressing a book into your hand and recommending it. So yeah, I've got more. But I'm going to give Neena a chance to talk.
Oh, no, I'm just going to echo what you were saying. What LoveReading is doing in terms of book reviews and recommendations and putting new books on people's radar is so important. I'll share this with the webinar attendees after and with you, Deborah, but this is a case report. So it's 2 UK primary school teachers talking about the barriers to implementing reading for pleasure in their classrooms. And one of the biggest ones that they mention is just not knowing about new books, not feeling confident to be able to recommend them. Something I feel too, I knew about Dog Man, but what else is out there? My son can't keep reading Dog Man forever, So what are the great books out there at their level and at their interests? And so I think that's a great thing that's definitely a solution to get people, young children, more hooked on reading and reading for pleasure, just knowing and being able to recommend for that student which book they're going to like. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we read, the team reads between 75 and 100 children's books a month. And that's sort of from baby toddler right up to young adult, right across the genres, right across the age ranges. So we're constantly going, okay, make sure we've got a real breadth of titles and brilliant authors, not necessarily the big name authors, although of course if they're brilliant we'll be shouting about them, but we're talking about maybe the books from smaller publishers who might not necessarily have the coverage that they really deserve. And then you can sign up to our regular newsletters, which gives you a selection of those book reviews every month. But it's about browsing authors, and we've even got a sort of an algorithm there. So it'd be like, okay, if you like Dog Man, if you go to the Dog Man page, you will then see, here are suggestions of other books that your child might like. So it will say, well, actually, these are similar books that you also might love. And I think that's key, you know, because not every child is inspired or influenced by the same things. And once I got to the point that of recommending the books I loved as a child, and my son going, Mum, really? You know, I realised that it wasn't, you know, of course, some of those classics still are as wonderful today, but actually my kids are very different to who I was at their age. And I think it sort of links to diverse and inclusive bookshelves too. Because it's definitely, I mean, we recently went into a school up in Leeds who massively changed the cohort. And they did a review of their library stock and realised they had a really, I think in the end it was about 120 different nationalities within the school. I mean, ridiculous. And actually the book stock was 96% white. And they were like, we need help making sure that we have books where all children can see themselves reflected, for all children to feel connected and feel inspired by people like them, and see the names like theirs on the covers of books, and children looking like them in the pages of books. So that's really important, that diverse and inclusive. And there's so much really brilliant diverse and inclusive literature for children being published that I think we need to really highlight that as much as we can.
That's one of the lovely things about what you're doing at LoveReading, though, is that for that to exist, you need options.
Yeah.
And when you're getting into that virtuous cycle of buying a book, school gets more funds for books, buy more books, you suddenly start to create that environment, right? So I think that's a very strong contributor in a positive direction.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
Part of the reason we did that is because working in a school and having been a governor for 11 years, I was just seeing here in the UK so many schools not able to buy books, which sounds crazy, but there's some tough decisions around what can we afford. And so our bookstore with social purpose enables you to buy a book, and if you're in the UK, you can donate that to a UK school, 25% of what you've spent at no cost to you. And we're about to announce that we've so far donated £100,000 worth of books into schools that really need it. So we're very proud of that. But I think mentioning the library there, of course it's about buying books, but it's about our libraries. This is another way we can, really encourage reading for pleasure. It's take them to a bookstore, of course, but take them to a library. My local library, we didn't have many books growing up at home at all. And I've actually still got my books behind me, my Bramley Hedge books that my mum bought me on my 5th birthday, and I've still got them with a little annotation in the front. And they were the first books that I own, and she took me to the library the next week because I was so in love with them, I couldn't stop stroking them. And I got my library card, and that our libraries are places of magic. We need to nurture them. Our librarians should be cherished, because without that library, I guarantee I wouldn't be the reader I am today. And I honestly think that reading changed my life. My love of books changed my life. So don't forget about our libraries, or either our school libraries or our local libraries, because they're precious.
Funny how things like that affect you. I've got my bookshelves behind my camera, not the other side, but I've got my granddad gave me a copy of the Jungle Book. I think it's about 80 years old, and he wrote a note in the front of it, and it's but it's amazing how you keep going back to reading things. Like you almost make that emotional connection, and it's so powerful, isn't it?
It's so powerful. It's so powerful. I've got 2 more. I'm so sorry I'm going on so much, but I just feel like there's such important elements to this whole reluctant readers. The other thing we haven't mentioned are kids who, as you say, they're reluctant, they're not necessarily going to pick up a book. We've got a whole section on the website called Reluctant Readers for those kids. And, it will include things like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Tom Gates, Dogman, and lots more more recently published from authors you won't have heard from. Funny books, like absolutely hilarious books that will have the most reluctant of readers, absolutely grabbing for the next book. So that is again, it comes back to the right books, but reluctant readers is an area of the type, of our section. We've also got, and we haven't really touched upon this, but we've got dyslexia friendly books, because of course we know how many children struggle with dyslexia, and there are lots of publishers creating super readable titles, all of which are also dyslexia friendly. They come, on particular paper with particular typefaces, and they're just brilliant ways of engaging children struggling with dyslexia. So just the two areas that I think deserve a mention for those particularly struggling with children in those areas. And the final one is reading together, or social reading spaces. I totally messed up here. I total hands up. With my son, I thought we used to read a book every night at bedtime. And we always did. But once he learned to read, I honestly almost assumed the job was done and we didn't do it anymore. And I do think that's part of that, him falling out of love with reading. With my daughter, I learned from that, and I continued to read with her way past the age that I did with my son. Now she's 13, she's nearly 14. I read loads of children's books, which are brilliant. We are never, ever too old to read kids' books. Can I just say that right now? There's a brilliant book by the wonderful Catherine Rundell, if you've not read it, which says why we should read children's books, even though we are so old and wise, because they've got so much to teach us. Anyway, I read a lot, and I then say, Frankie, please read this book, because I think you'll really love it. And then she reads it and we discuss it together. So book chat, whether at home or at school, is precious. So find a reading nook, find a reading corner, read together. I read a page, she read a page, or you read a book, then pass it to them. Don't stop talking about books or spending time with books when you're kids, when you think the job is done, because it's never done.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I have so many things to add, but I'll limit it to just two things. I love reading children's books. I'm reading James and the Giant Peach for the first time to my son while he's doing his own independent reading, and then we read together and talk about it. It's great. It's so whimsical. It's really fun. I love that you have a section for reluctant readers and students with dyslexia, because that's so important to meet them where they're at and make sure they have the foundational skills first. We've been talking a lot about level, and there's some stat that I saw that, within a classroom, there's about 15 different levels, like kids are at different places. And so I feel like I have to mention, here we have the Lexile framework for reading. So it matches students to text. There's a student measure, and then books are also measured. And on Lexile Find a Book, you can find books, you can sort by interest as well. And it helps address that problem of, parents and teachers might not always know what that range is for a particular student. So this can help with that as a solution, some sort of guidance. And then you can also, we know interest and level matter so much, so you could also search by interest as well. And Matt, you can chime in as well with some information more about the Lexile framework for reading. And anyone listening to the webinar, feel free to connect with us later. We'll be talking about this as well in future webinars.
I think your both of your passion is shining through for this, and some very practical examples of suggestions. I similar experience to my kids actually, and Deborah, I'm going to take some of those away tonight and see if I can see if I can get young Harry or young Sophia on a better path of reading. That would be very helpful. Just for in the spirit of staying to time, if I may, one more question, and then we've got a bit of Q&A that I can pull a few questions out of, if that's okay. So, as we mentioned at the start, Deborah, you mentioned it a few seconds ago, and next year being the National Year of Reading here in the UK. Deborah, what would you want to see prioritised that can genuinely reverse these trends? You know, what's stopping us making progress, do you think? And do you think, how do you think we can better connect resources with learners and their individual learning pathways?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. You're right. So, you know, the Secretary of State announced the Year of Reading. It kickstarts in January. The idea is that it will bring together parents and schools and libraries and businesses and literacy experts and organisations like LoveReading to try and reverse the trends. I mean, my hope is that it will bring people together. I've got a meeting next month where they've invited all of the literacy organisations to attend and talk about the plans and how we can work together. I think the challenge up until now has been there's loads of people doing brilliant stuff. You know, there's the Centre for Literacy and Primary Education, there's the Reading Agency, there's the National Literacy Trust doing brilliant, brilliant things, but it's not cohesive. And I'm hoping that this will be a cohesive effort where everyone is united in this effort, and that it won't just be a PR campaign, but a national movement. And it has to be a national movement because, you know, unless we embed this into family life, into school culture, into adult leisure and normalise reading, it's never going to do everything it needs to. And this needs to transform literacy in this country. It needs to transform the life chances for kids. We know everything changes when we read. We know that children who read for pleasure are more successful in life. There is so much research to prove it. But, you know, so this needs to happen. This needs to happen. So what I'd like to see is mass participation and visibility, not just, you know, a news piece here, a news piece there, preaching to the converted, preaching to the people who are already totally, you know, sort of on board at this, you know, MetaMetrics of this world, the LoveReadings of this world. You know, we all know the importance of it. So it needs to be really high profile. It needs to be national. It needs to be everywhere. It needs to have partnerships with the key broadcasters, of course, the publishers and celebrities, to normalise it. I think it has to have support for parents and families. You know, one of the reasons, you know, for the drop-off in children reading with their parents is time, is this, you know, this financial crisis. Parents are working more than ever before. They have got less time than ever before. So we need to support parents in that. We need to have specific outreach to low-income households where book ownership and access is at its lowest. We need work in schools. We need work in our libraries, in our community hubs. We need to do more for adults reading, probably, you know, and actually probably encourage employers to support, I don't know, even reading breaks or workplace book clubs, or, you know, it's about harnessing technology, audiobooks, podcasts, social media, interactive formats to meet young people where they are, but also engage with the adult communities who aren't reading. I mean, there's so much. I can't wait to hear what the plans are. I really can't. And I hope they're everything that I dream they will be, because we need to make the most of this.
I know we might be even out of time, but I'll just echo what Deborah said. I agree. I think awareness of some of these, all of those are wonderful solutions, and just awareness of some of the products and services available out there, what MetaMetrics is doing, what LoveReading is doing to help get that book in the hands, the right book at the right time for the right reader. I love that.
Wonderful. I think we are almost out of time, but I will, if it's okay, I'll pull one question out of the Q&A that's come through, just because it's something that seems to keep coming up over again. And Matt, I might put you on the spot a little bit on this one and just see if you'd like to offer some perspectives for us. The question is, what's your view on instructional reading and reading for pleasure, and how do they support each other? Maybe start with Matt, if that's okay.
Well, Matt, thank you. And it is a question that keeps coming up, and to our AA attendee there, well done for posing that. A non-academic answer, of course, but within the context of instruction, there's a possibility to take the reader beyond current ability level, using the skills of the educator in order to help expose that learning opportunity. It has very, very specific learning opportunity there in that guided way. When we start to think about reading for pleasure, we see that narrower bound to ability that Deborah and Neena have helped us talk about and understand. And they absolutely complement each other in different ways. We know when people go wide and broad and it's interest-driven, comprehension improves. So there's the wide and improvement in level. And then there's this careful role of educators to help bring forward materials at different level. And of course, if we were to talk about that in the context of Lexile, we can be quite specific about that in terms of what those bands look like for pleasure-based and for instructional. So a starter for 10 there and comments back from Neena and Deborah.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go on, Neena, you go first.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that, yeah, you have to, obviously you want to increase the skill. So if you know where that sweet spot is, where it's challenging, but not too challenging, it's not going to frustrate the student. And that's great about Lexiles. What they can provide is that range of, okay, let's work within this area and let's pick a book of interest.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work with Professor Teresa Kremen of the Open University RFP, and she always says the will influences the skill, and they have to go hand in hand, because without the skill you won't build the will. None of us like doing things we're rubbish at. It's demoralizing and demotivating, but without the will you can't progress either. So I think they have to go hand in hand. I think historically in UK schools, we have worried about the skill, and the reading for pleasure maybe was a little bit behind the curve. But I definitely think there's a shift happening where, we're taught, since the reading framework was published a couple of years ago, there's definitely been more of an awareness of what good reading for pleasure looks like, and schools really focusing on how to deliver that reading for pleasure culture. But it needs to be both. It needs to be both.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry to not have more time to go through them all, but where there are names, there's some brilliant questions in here. So where there are names, I commit to reaching back out and following up and hoping we can address those questions. So if I can offer a brief summary of the discussion, if I may. Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone on our panel, and thank you to all of you for sharing your precious time with us today and being part of what I think we all believe is a really important conversation. We've explored some of the risks and jeopardy of what this UK reading recession might bring, and what the effects of this might be for today's generation. There are certainly many challenges, but opportunities exist too, right? Opportunities to make meaningful interventions that can reverse the trend, make a positive impact on young people's lives. Opportunities to spark a love of reading in young people. If there's as much passion as Neena and Deborah show in our teaching community, I'm sure we won't struggle with that. And opportunities to share the passion for literacy and benefit today's generation. So we will be sharing a recording of the webinar shortly, and we hope to host more in the series. But for now, thanks again for your time, and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.